My name is Sibylla. I am 19, and last year I learned that family love can sometimes be the most painful kind. All my life I've been the invisible twin while my sister Amelia basked in our parents' endless adoration. I never expected my college acceptance letter would ignite a family war that would force me to choose between my future and my family's approval. If you're watching from a family with favoritism issues too, drop your location in the comments and hit subscribe to see how I finally stood up for myself after years of being the invisible twin. Growing up in our upper middle class suburb of Minneapolis, I always knew my place in the family hierarchy. My father, James, worked as an investment banker, putting in 60-hour weeks at a prestigious firm downtown. He wore tailored suits, drove a sleek black Audi, and carried himself with the confidence of someone who never doubted his place in the world. My mother, Diana, had been a beauty queen in her youth before transitioning to a successful career in real estate. She maintained her pageant-perfect appearance even decades later. Her blonde hair always styled her makeup flawless, and her wardrobe straight from the pages of luxury catalogs. And then there were us twins. From the outside, Amelia and I looked identical with our wavy brown hair and hazel eyes. But that's where the similarities ended. Amelia was the golden child from the moment we took our first breath 20 minutes before I made my entrance into the world. She was louder, more charming, more social, and seemed to instinctively understand how to wrap our parents around her finger. I was the quiet one, the bookworm, the responsible sibling who followed rules and rarely demanded attention. The favoritism started early and only grew more obvious as the years passed. When we turned 8, Amelia received an elaborate birthday party with a rented carousel, professional face painters, and a custom cake that must have cost hundreds. My celebration the following weekend was a simple family dinner with practical gifts like clothes and books. I pretended not to notice the difference, but even at that age I understood the message Amelia was special. I was an afterthought. Family vacations followed a predictable pattern. If Amelia wanted to visit Disney World, we went to Disney World. If she developed a sudden interest in horseback riding, we found ourselves at a dude ranch in Montana. My suggestions for science museums or historical sites were dismissed as boring. "Maybe next time," my mother would say with a distracted smile, but next time never came. Even our family photographs told the story of our family dynamic. In nearly every portrait hanging in our hallway, my parents positioned themselves on either side of Amelia, with me relegated to the edge of the frame. Sometimes I wonder if they even noticed they were doing it, this physical manifestation of how they saw our family with Amelia at the center of their universe. The pattern continued throughout elementary and middle school. When I won the district science fair in 6th grade, neither parent attended the ceremony because it conflicted with Amelia's dance recital. "We'll see your certificate when you get home," my mother said, kissing me on the forehead as she helped Amelia into her sequined costume. I sat alone at the awards ceremony accepting my blue ribbon while scanning the audience for faces that wouldn't appear. My coping mechanism was to throw myself into academics. If I couldn't earn my parents' attention through the force of my personality like Amelia did, perhaps my achievements would finally make them notice me. I spent hours in the library, joined every academic club, and maintained a perfect GPA. Meanwhile, Amelia floated through school on charm and connections, doing just enough to get by while focusing on her social life and popularity. Not everyone overlooked me, though. My grandmother Margaret saw me clearly from the beginning. "You have depth, Sibylla," she would tell me during our Sunday visits to her small but immaculate house across town. "Never apologize for being thoughtful rather than flashy." Those afternoons with Grandma Margaret became my sanctuary, the one place I could breathe without feeling like I was taking up too much space. In high school, I found another ally in Ms. Wilson, my English teacher, who recognized my talent for writing. Under her mentorship, I discovered journalism and found my voice on the school newspaper. For the first time, I dared to dream about a future where my words mattered, where I could tell stories that needed telling. Northwestern University's prestigious journalism program became my goal, the North Star. I fixed my eyes upon through the turbulent waters of adolescence. While I was mapping out my future with color-coded study schedules and extracurricular activities designed to strengthen my college applications, Amelia continued her carefree approach to life. She partied on weekends, dated the captain of the football team, and assumed her path would unfold effortlessly before her, because it always had. Our parents reinforced this worldview, assuring her that her special qualities would open doors that mere academic achievement could not. Connections matter more than grades, our father would say over dinner, winking at Amelia. And personality goes further than test scores. These statements weren't directed at me explicitly, but the message was clear all the same. My diligence was pedestrian, uninspiring compared to Amelia's magnetic charm. Despite everything, I loved my sister. When we were alone away from our parents' differential treatment, we could still find moments of genuine connection. Late at night, she would sometimes slip into my bedroom and we'd talk about our dreams and fears like normal sisters. In those rare moments, I could almost forget the imbalance that defined our family dynamic. Sometimes I feel like they've already decided who we are. I confided in her once during our junior year, like I'm stuck being the boring twin forever. Amelia looked surprised, as though the thought had never occurred to her. "You're not boring, Sib. You're just different from me. And that's okay." But even as she said the words, I could see she didn't fully understand. How could she? She'd never experienced the shadow side of our parents' favoritism. She'd never known what it felt like to be invisible in your own home. Senior year arrived with a flurry of college brochures and application deadlines. As expected, our parents approached the process with the same lopsided attention they gave everything else in our lives. For Amelia, they hired Mr. Patterson, an expensive college counselor who charged $200 per hour to help craft the perfect application strategy. They paid for private SAT tutoring sessions twice weekly and arranged alumni interviews through their network of connections. For me, there was a single conversation over breakfast. "You should probably start thinking about where you want to apply," my father said without looking up from his Wall Street Journal. "State schools might be a good fit for your situation." My situation. As though my years of academic excellence were some kind of handicap to be managed rather than celebrated. I nodded and said nothing, already accustomed to the sting of their lowered expectations. That afternoon, I picked up extra shifts at the local bookstore where I'd been working part-time since junior year. College applications weren't cheap, and I knew better than to expect financial support for my dreams. Each application fee represented hours of shelving books and ringing up customers, but I was determined to apply to schools that matched my ambitions, not my parents' limited vision for me. Night after night, I stayed up late working on application essays while listening to the murmur of voices from Amelia's room across the hall. My father's deep laugh, my mother's encouraging words as they helped my sister craft the perfect personal statement. I turned up my music to drown out the sounds of the support I wasn't receiving and focused on making my own words shine. My college list was the result of careful research and realistic assessment of my chances. Northwestern remained my dream school, but I also selected backup options that offered strong journalism programs: University of Wisconsin, Madison, University of Minnesota, Syracuse University, and several others. Each selection represented hours of research into program strengths, alumni success rates, and financial aid options. Amelia's approach couldn't have been more different. Encouraged by our parents and Mr. Patterson, she applied exclusively to prestigious institutions, regardless of fit: Harvard, Yale, Princeton, Stanford, Columbia, and Northwestern too, though she had little interest in journalism. "Why limit yourself?" our mother said when I questioned the strategy. "Amelia has star quality. These schools would be lucky to have her." The unspoken comparison hung in the air between us. If Amelia had star quality, what did that make me? The moon, perhaps reflecting someone else's light, but generating none of my own. My grandmother was the only one who took genuine interest in my college aspirations. During one of our Sunday visits, I confessed my fear that Northwestern's application fee might be beyond my savings. "Nonsense," she said firmly, reaching for her checkbook. "This is an investment in your future, and I believe in you completely." I tried to refuse, but she wouldn't hear of it. "I've been saving for this moment, Sibylla. Let me do this for you." That check represented more than financial assistance. It was validation, a tangible sign that someone believed my dreams were worth investing in. The tension at home grew as application season progressed. At Thanksgiving, our relatives unwittingly reinforced the family dynamic. "So, Amelia, which Ivy League school will be lucky enough to get you?" asked Uncle Robert over pumpkin pie. "Oh, I'm keeping my options open," she replied with practiced modesty while our parents beamed. "And what about you, Sibylla?" he added as an afterthought. Before I could answer, my mother jumped in. "Sibylla is being very practical about her choices," she said with a tight smile that didn't reach her eyes. "Not everyone is cut out for the pressure of elite institutions." I pushed my pie away, appetite gone, and excused myself from the table. In my bedroom, I reread the Northwestern brochure for the 100th time and reminded myself that in a few months, I might have the chance to prove them all wrong. December brought early decision results, and with them the first real cracks in our family's carefully constructed narrative. My Northwestern application had been submitted, early decision binding me to attend if accepted. It was a risk given the competitive nature of the program, but my portfolio of articles from the school newspaper and glowing recommendation from Ms. Wilson gave me cautious hope. The email arrived during dinner. My phone notification chimed, and I nearly dropped my fork when I saw the sender, Northwestern University admissions. Hands shaking, I asked to be excused and ran to my room, heart pounding so loudly I was sure everyone in the house could hear it. "Dear Sibylla," the email began. I skimmed through the paragraph until my eyes landed on the words that would change everything. "Pleased to offer you admission to Northwestern University's Medill School of Journalism." I read the sentence over and over, making sure I hadn't misunderstood. Not only had I been accepted, but the letter mentioned a partial merit scholarship based on my academic achievements and journalistic promise. This wasn't just acceptance, it was validation of everything I'd worked for, everything I'd believed about myself, despite my family's indifference. When I returned to the dining room, eyes bright with unshed tears of joy, my parents looked up expectantly. "I got in," I said, voice barely above a whisper. "I got into Northwestern, with a scholarship." The silence that followed should have been filled with congratulations, with pride, with the celebration I'd earned. Instead, my father nodded briefly and said, "That's nice, Sibylla," before turning to Amelia. "Don't worry, sweetheart. Your acceptances will be coming soon, and I'm sure they'll be even more impressive." Just like that, my moment was over, subsumed by the familiar pattern of our family's priorities. My mother gave me a distracted smile and began discussing Amelia's upcoming alumni interview with Columbia. I sat back down and finished my dinner in silence, the taste of achievement turning bitter in my mouth. January and February dragged by in a haze of anticipation and anxiety. While I had secured my place at Northwestern, Amelia's future remained uncertain as we waited for regular decision results from her ambitious list of schools. Our parents' nervousness manifested in different ways. My father made frequent calls to college contacts, dropping hints about Amelia's potential. My mother obsessively checked online forums for any early indications of acceptance rates and decision dates. Throughout this period, my own achievement faded into the background. No one asked about my scholarship details or my plans for Northwestern. It was as though my future had been checked off a list and promptly forgotten, while the family's collective energy focused on Amelia's pending decisions. The first letter arrived in early March, a thin envelope from Harvard that contained not the expected acceptance, but a polite rejection. Amelia cried for hours while our parents consoled her, assuring her that Harvard's loss was another university's gain. No one mentioned that I was sitting right there at the dining table, witness to the dramatic display of support I had never received. "It's just one school," my father insisted, arm around Amelia's shoulders. "The others will recognize your unique gifts." But they didn't. One by one, the rejections accumulated. Princeton, Yale, Columbia. With each new disappointment, the atmosphere in our house grew more strained. Amelia's confidence crumbled visibly, her usual vibrancy dimming with every thin envelope. Our parents' reassurances grew increasingly desperate, their explanations more elaborate. "These schools have ridiculous quotas now," my father fumed after Stanford's rejection arrived. "It's all about checking boxes, not recognizing real talent." Meanwhile, more details about my Northwestern financial aid package arrived. The combination of merit scholarship work-study program and grants meant that I could actually afford to attend without taking on excessive debt. When the information came in the mail, I shared it with my grandmother rather than my parents, knowing she would appreciate the significance. "I'm so proud of you," she told me over the phone, her voice thick with emotion. "You've earned this through your own hard work and determination. No one can take that away from you." Her words sustained me through the increasingly tense atmosphere at home. As Amelia's options narrowed, my parents' behavior became more erratic. They questioned admissions offices, demanded explanations, and even suggested appealing some of the decisions. Nothing worked. The final blow came in late March. Northwestern's decision for Amelia arrived, and like all the others, it was a rejection. This one hit differently, though. Northwestern was my school now, the place I had earned my spot through years of dedication. The fact that Amelia the golden child couldn't follow me there upended the established family narrative in ways none of us were prepared for. That night, I heard Amelia crying through our shared wall. Her sobs weren't the theatrical tears she'd shed after previous rejections designed to elicit sympathy and reassurance. These were raw, private sounds of genuine disappointment. I wanted to go to her to offer comfort, but something held me back. Maybe it was self-preservation, a reluctance to step back into my supporting role when I had finally achieved something of my own. Or maybe it was the knowledge that my presence would only emphasize what she had lost and I had gained. Either way, I stayed in my room listening to her grief while our parents' murmured consolations drifted through the walls. Their words carried clearly in the quiet house. "We'll figure something out, Princess. This isn't the end of the world. There are always other options." What I couldn't have known then was that the other option they were considering would involve sacrificing my future to salvage Amelia's wounded pride. A week after Amelia's final rejection letter, my father called me into his home office. The room had always been somewhat forbidden territory, a masculine space of leather and mahogany where important family decisions were made without my input. I entered cautiously, noting my mother's presence on the leather sofa and the unusual tension in the air. "Sit down, Sibylla," my father said, gesturing to the chair across from his imposing desk. "We need to discuss your college situation." My college situation. Not my achievement, not my scholarship, not my future. A situation to be managed like a problem that had arisen unexpectedly. "What about it?" I asked, already feeling defensive. "Everything's finalized. I start in September." My parents exchanged a look I couldn't quite interpret. My mother leaned forward, her expression a practiced mask of maternal concern. "Sweetheart, we've been thinking about what's best for the family, and we believe it would make sense for you to defer your admission for a year." I stared at her, certain I had misheard. "Defer? Why would I defer?" "So you and Amelia can apply to schools together next year," my father explained, as though this clarified everything. "It would be better for everyone if you both started college at the same time." The absurdity of the suggestion left me momentarily speechless. They wanted me to give up my hard-earned spot at Northwestern, my scholarship, my carefully laid plans so that Amelia wouldn't have to face the indignity of attending college alone, or worse, watching me succeed where she had failed. "That makes absolutely no sense," I finally managed. "I've been accepted. I have a scholarship. Why would I give that up?" My father cleared his throat, shifting into the authoritative tone he used for non-negotiable decisions. "Sibylla, your sister is devastated by these rejections. The psychological impact of watching you go off to college while she stays behind would be extremely damaging to her self-esteem." "And what about my self-esteem?" I countered, my voice rising despite my efforts to stay calm. "What about the work I've put in to earn this opportunity?" "It's just a year," my mother interjected smoothly. "You can take some community college courses locally, build your resume even more, and then reapply next year alongside Amelia. It would be so much nicer for you two to experience college together." As they continued talking, the full picture emerged with horrifying clarity. They had constructed an entire narrative where my deferral wasn't a sacrifice, but an opportunity, a chance to strengthen my application further while supporting my struggling sister. In their version, I would graciously step aside so that Amelia could regroup, improve her applications, and we would both attend prestigious universities the following year, our family dynamic undisturbed. "We've always taught you girls the importance of family," my mother said, her voice taking on the emotional tremor she used when she wanted to close a difficult real estate deal. "If you really loved your sister, you'd understand why this is the right choice." Something snapped inside me at those words. 17 years of swallowed resentment, of accepting second place in my own family, of making myself smaller to accommodate Amelia's oversized presence in our parents' hearts, all crystallized into a sudden, fierce clarity. "No," I said, the single syllable cutting through my mother's emotional manipulation. "I'm not deferring. I earned my place at Northwestern, and I'm going in September as planned." My father's expression hardened. "We're not asking, Sibylla. We're telling you what's going to happen. And you should know that if you insist on being selfish about this, we won't be contributing financially to your education." "You weren't contributing anyway," I shot back, surprised by my own boldness. "My scholarship and financial aid cover most costs, and I've been saving from my job for the rest." "There are other expenses beyond tuition," he countered. "Housing, books, flights home for holidays, emergencies. Without our support, you'll struggle." Before I could respond, my mother played her final card. "Besides, it might be too late. We've already called Northwestern's admissions office to discuss your deferral." The blood drained from my face. "You did what?" "We explained that due to family circumstances, you needed to defer your enrollment for a year," my father said, not quite meeting my eyes. "They said they'd need your confirmation, of course, but that these requests are usually granted." I stood up so quickly the chair nearly toppled behind me. "You had no right to do that. No right at all." The door to the office opened, then revealing Amelia hovering uncertainly in the doorway. Her eyes were red-rimmed, her expression a mixture of guilt and hope that told me she knew exactly what our parents were proposing. "I didn't ask them to do this, Sib," she said quietly. "But maybe it wouldn't be so bad. We could go to college together next year like we always talked about when we were kids." We had never talked about attending college together. That was a fiction created to serve the current narrative, a rewriting of our history to justify the unjustifiable. "This is insane," I said, looking from one family member to another. "You're asking me to give up my future for no reason other than Amelia can't have the exact future she wanted." "It's not giving up," my father insisted. "It's postponing. And there's another option, too. You could both attend Riverdale Community College for a year or two, then transfer to 4-year universities together." The suggestion was so far removed from my carefully constructed plans, so dismissive of everything I had worked for, that I couldn't even formulate a response. Instead, I walked out of the office, out of the house, and kept walking until I reached the park 3 blocks away, where I used to play as a child. There, on a bench surrounded by early spring flowers, I called the one person who had always seen me clearly. "Grandma, I need your help." That phone call to Grandmother Margaret marked the beginning of the worst and most transformative period of my life. Sitting on that park bench as the sun set, I poured out everything: my parents' outrageous demand, their manipulation, their attempt to interfere with my admission. Most painfully, I confessed the realization that had been forming in my heart for years, but that I had never fully acknowledged until that moment. They don't love me the same way they love her grandma. They never have. My grandmother's silence spoke volumes, confirming what we both knew to be true. "What they're doing isn't love, Sibylla," she finally said. "Not for you, and not for Amelia either. True love lifts people up. It doesn't sacrifice one child's needs for another's wants." As I listened to her wise words, memories cascaded through my mind. Birthdays, where my achievements were footnotes to Amelia's celebrations. School events where I sat alone while my parents cheered for my sister. Family discussions where my opinions were ignored or dismissed. Years of being overlooked, years of trying to earn the attention freely given to my twin. "What do I do?" I asked, suddenly feeling very young and very alone. "You hold your ground," my grandmother said firmly. This is your future they're trying to erase. You've worked too hard to let them take it away now. That night, I didn't return home until I was certain everyone would be asleep. I slipped into my bedroom like a thief, gathering emotional strength for the battle ahead. The next morning, I reached out to Ms. Wilson, my English teacher, who had become a mentor over the years. "This is completely inappropriate," she said after hearing my situation. "Your parents have no right to interfere with your college admission like this." Through her connections, Ms. Wilson introduced me to Amanda Torres, a Northwestern alumna who had graduated from Medill 5 years earlier and now worked for the Minneapolis Star-Tribune. Over coffee at a downtown cafe, Amanda offered practical advice and moral support. "Call the admissions office immediately and explain the situation," she urged. "Make it clear that any communication from your parents was unauthorized. Then contact financial aid about independent student status options." Following her advice, I spent the next day making calls from the school library during my free periods. The admissions officer sounded concerned when I explained that my parents had misrepresented my intentions. "We've noted your file, Ms. Lambert," she assured me. "No changes will be made without direct confirmation from you via your personal email or phone." The financial aid conversation was more complicated. True independence for financial aid purposes required meeting specific criteria that most 18-year-olds couldn't satisfy: being married, having dependents, being an orphan or ward of the court, or having documentation of an abusive home situation. Parental favoritism doesn't qualify as abuse in financial aid terms, the counselor explained gently. But let's look at other options to maximize your aid package without parental contribution. Meanwhile, at home, the pressure intensified. My father alternated between icy silence and persuasive arguments about family loyalty. My mother employed emotional tactics, crying about how I was tearing the family apart with my selfish obsession with Northwestern. "We're just asking for 1 year," she pleaded during dinner one night. "1 year to keep our family together, to help your sister heal from this disappointment." "And what about my disappointment?" I finally exploded. "What about the fact that you've never once put my needs first? That you called my university behind my back? That you're trying to sabotage everything I've worked for?" The silence that followed was deafening. Even Amelia looked shocked at my outburst. I had never confronted them so directly before, never named the dynamic that had shaped our family for as long as I could remember. "That's not true," my father finally said, his voice dangerously quiet. "We've always treated you girls equally." The blatant falsehood almost made me laugh. "You know that's not true. Everyone knows it's not true. Even Amelia knows it." All eyes turned to my sister, who suddenly looked trapped. For a moment, I felt a flicker of sympathy for her. She hadn't created this situation, even if she'd benefited from it all her life. Later that night, Amelia came to my room, slipping in quietly like she used to when we were younger. She sat on the edge of my bed, twisting her hands in her lap. "I didn't ask them to make you defer," she said after a long silence. "I swear I didn't." "But you're not telling them to stop either," I pointed out. She looked away. "It's complicated. They've always had these expectations for me, and now I've failed and they're so disappointed and I don't know how to fix it." For the first time, I glimpsed the burden that came with being the golden child, the pressure of constant expectations, the terror of failure. Amelia had been placed on a pedestal so high that any fall would be devastating. "You haven't failed," I told her gently. "Not getting into those schools doesn't define your worth." "Easy for you to say," she muttered. "You got in." "Because I worked for it, Amelia. I've been working for it for years while you were busy being the center of attention. And now that my work has paid off, they want to take it away from me to make you feel better." She was silent for a long moment. Would it really be so terrible to wait a year? We could apply together, maybe even be roommates somewhere. The question revealed how little she understood what was at stake. This wasn't about timing or convenience. This was about my autonomy, my future, my right to the success I had earned. "Yes, it would be terrible," I said firmly. "I'm not giving up my spot at Northwestern. Not for you, not for them, not for anyone." As the weeks passed, I researched every possible angle to secure my independence. I opened a separate bank account at a different bank from my parents, had my paychecks deposited there, and began saving every penny I could spare. I made copies of my birth certificate, social security card, and other essential documents, storing the copies at my grandmother's house for safekeeping. The tension at home grew until it felt like living in a war zone. Every conversation became a potential minefield, every family meal a tactical engagement. My parents escalated their tactics, moving from emotional appeals to concrete threats. "If you insist on this selfish path," my father announced at breakfast one Saturday, "don't expect to come home for holidays, don't expect help with emergencies, don't even expect us to attend your graduation." The words were meant to terrify me into submission. In some ways they did. The thought of being cut off from my family, problematic as they were, opened a hollow pit in my stomach. But alongside the fear was a growing certainty that I couldn't surrender this battle, not if I ever wanted to look at myself in the mirror again. The climactic confrontation came in late April as the deadline for confirming my enrollment at Northwestern loomed. My parents called a family dinner, presenting it as a chance to discuss compromise solutions. There was no compromise on the table, though only a repackaged version of their original demand. I should defer admission, attend community college with Amelia, and apply again the following year to schools they deemed suitable for both of us. "We've already spoken to Dr. Rivera at Riverdale Community College," my mother announced, a triumphant note in her voice. "He's holding spots for both of you in their honors program." The presumption took my breath away. They had gone ahead and made arrangements for my education without even consulting me, as though my opinions, my dreams, my agency didn't matter at all. "No," I said, the word dropping like a stone between us. "I'm not deferring, I'm not going to community college, and I'm not letting you decide my future for me." "Then you're choosing Northwestern over your family," my father said, his voice hard with finality. "And you need to understand what that means." "I'm not choosing Northwestern over family," I corrected him. "I'm choosing myself, maybe for the first time ever." The following morning, I called Northwestern to confirm my enrollment and finalize my housing arrangements. My hands shook as I completed the online forms, but with each field I filled, my resolve strengthened. This was my future, earned through years of hard work, and I was claiming it despite everything. That afternoon, I began packing my essential belongings. My plan, developed with my grandmother's help, was to move to her house until the dorms opened in August. It wasn't ideal. My grandmother's small home barely had room for an extra person, but it offered safety and support when I needed it most. Word of my decision spread quickly through our extended family, creating ripples of confusion and concern. My mother, ever conscious of appearances, had crafted a narrative for relatives I was going through a rebellious phase, making impulsive decisions that threatened to derail my potential. Few questioned this version of events. Why would they? It fit neatly into the established family mythology, where Amelia was the star and I was the problem child. My Aunt Jessica, my mother's younger sister, was the exception. She called me directly rather than accepting my mother's account. "Something doesn't add up here, Sibylla," she said. "Your mom's saying you're throwing away your future, but from what I can tell, you're fighting for it." When I explained the real situation, her outrage mirrored my own. "They asked you to give up Northwestern after you worked so hard to get in. That's beyond unreasonable." Having even one family member validate my position provided strength I desperately needed. The house had become increasingly hostile territory. My mother alternated between tearful recriminations and icy silence. My father made pointed comments about ungrateful children and family disloyalty whenever I was within earshot. Only Amelia maintained some semblance of normal relationship with me, though there was a new awkwardness between us, a recognition that the family dynamic had been irrevocably altered. The situation reached a breaking point when I discovered my parents had gone through my room while I was at school, taking my acceptance letter and scholarship information from the drawer where I kept important documents. Fortunately, I had already made copies and secured the originals at my grandmother's house, but the violation of privacy infuriated me. "You had no right to go through my things," I confronted them that evening. "We have every right," my father countered. "You're still a minor living under our roof using our resources." The reminder of my dependence stung, but it also accelerated my plans. The following day, I asked for additional hours at the bookstore and began looking for a second job for the summer. Every dollar I earned was another step toward genuine independence. My parents' next move caught me by surprise. They showed up at the bookstore during my shift, cornering me in the break room with renewed demands and threats. The public setting didn't deter them, though my father lowered his voice to avoid attracting attention from my coworkers. "We've paid your enrollment deposit," he informed me with grim satisfaction. "Northwestern confirmed they've received your deferral request." My blood ran cold. That's not possible. I never submitted a deferral request. We explained the special family circumstances. My mother said, her expression a mixture of triumph and faux concern. They were very understanding. I excused myself, hands shaking, as I called the admissions office from the employee bathroom. After several anxious minutes on hold, I learned the truth. My parents had indeed contacted Northwestern again, but no changes had been made to my enrollment status. "As we discussed previously, Ms. Lambert, we require direct confirmation from you for any changes to your admission status," the administrator assured me. "Your enrollment for fall semester remains active and confirmed." The relief nearly buckled my knees, but it was short-lived. When I returned to finish my shift, I found my parents had spoken to my manager, claiming a family emergency required me to reduce my hours significantly. By the time I corrected the misunderstanding, the damage to my work schedule and reputation had been done. That night, as I packed more of my belongings, Amelia appeared in my doorway. She watched silently for several minutes before speaking. "Are you really moving to Grandma's?" I nodded without looking up, folding a sweater with deliberate care. "I can't stay here anymore. They're not going to stop trying to control me." She stepped into the room, closing the door behind her. "I have something for you." From her pocket, she withdrew a small envelope and handed it to me. Inside was $800 in cash, more money than I'd ever seen Amelia possess at once. "It's from my birthday money," she explained, seeing my confusion. "I've been saving it for spring break, but you need it more." The gesture stunned me. Amelia had never been one to sacrifice her own comforts or desires for anyone else, least of all for me. "Why?" She shrugged, looking uncomfortable with the question. "Because you're right. What they're doing isn't fair. And maybe I've never been fair to you either." It wasn't an apology for years of accepting preferential treatment, nor was it a promise to confront our parents about their behavior. But it was something, an acknowledgement of the imbalance that had defined our relationship since birth. "Thank you," I said, carefully tucking the money into my backpack. "This helps a lot." "Will you still talk to me?" she asked, suddenly, vulnerability plain in her voice. "After you move out? Or are you done with all of us?" The question hit a tender spot in my heart. Despite everything, Amelia was still my twin, still the person who had shared my entire life journey from the womb onward. "I'm not done with you," I assured her. "I'm just done with being invisible and undervalued." The day I moved out was ordinary in its weather, sunny with scattered clouds, but momentous in every other way. My grandmother arrived mid-morning while my parents were at work, her small car ready to transport what little I could take with me. Amelia helped us load my boxes, working quickly and quietly, as though afraid she might be caught in this act of solidarity. "I left a note," I told her as we carried the last box to the car, "explaining where I am and why I'm going." She nodded, glancing nervously at the house as though expecting our parents to materialize at any moment. "They're going to be so angry." "I know, but I can't live my life trying to manage their emotions anymore." We hugged goodbye, an awkward embrace that carried the weight of our complicated history and uncertain future. "Good luck at Northwestern," she whispered. "You're going to be amazing." Those words, the first unqualified support she had ever offered for my dreams, brought unexpected tears to my eyes. "Good luck to you too," I managed, "wherever you decide to go." Driving away from the only home I had ever known felt simultaneously terrifying and liberating. In the passenger seat of my grandmother's car, watching my neighborhood recede in the side mirror, I realized I had crossed a threshold that could never be uncrossed. I was no longer the compliant daughter accepting scraps of attention and approval. I had declared my worth, drawn my boundaries, and chosen myself even when those who should have championed me had failed to do so. The summer that followed was one of intense growth and preparation. I worked 2 jobs saving for the expenses my financial aid wouldn't cover. I connected with other incoming Northwestern freshmen through social media, forming tentative friendships that eased my anxiety about starting college alone. Most importantly, I began the inner work of untangling my self-worth from my family's warped perceptions, learning to see myself through my own eyes rather than theirs. My parents made several attempts to bring me back into the fold, each one conditional on my acquiescence to their demands. "You can come home if you're ready to be reasonable," my father said during one tense phone call. "If you've reconsidered your options for the fall." I hadn't, and I wouldn't. Each refusal strengthened my resolve, though the pain of their rejection never fully subsided. Some nights, lying on the fold-out sofa in my grandmother's living room, I wondered if the cost of my independence was too high. But when morning came, I would remember the feeling of my acceptance letter in my hands, the validation of my hard work, the future that awaited me if I stayed true to my path. On a sweltering August morning, I packed my belongings once more, this time into suitcases bound for Northwestern. My grandmother drove me to the airport, her presence a steadying force as I prepared to fly not just to Chicago, but into an entirely new chapter of my life. "I'm scared," I admitted as we waited at the departure gate. She squeezed my hand, her eyes wise and kind behind her glasses. "Being scared doesn't mean you're making the wrong choice. It means you're growing beyond what's comfortable." When they called my flight, I hugged her tightly, inhaling the familiar scent of her lavender perfume. "Thank you for believing in me," I whispered, "for seeing me when no one else did." "I've always seen you, Sibylla," she replied, her voice thick with emotion. "And now the world will see you too." My first weeks at Northwestern unfolded like a flower opening to the sun each day, bringing new challenges, new connections, new discoveries about myself. Moving into my dorm was a solitary experience, while other freshmen were surrounded by parents carrying boxes and offering last-minute advice. I arranged my belongings alone, acutely aware of the absence. My roommate Jada, a political science major from Atlanta, noticed immediately. "No family?" she asked as she hung fairy lights across our shared space. "It's complicated." I replied, the phrase becoming my standard response to questions about my background. Complicated barely scratched the surface of my family situation. The distance from Minneapolis to Evanston had not healed the rift created by my decision to attend Northwestern. My parents' communications remained sporadic and laden with passive-aggressive comments about my selfish choices and abandonment of family values. Each message required emotional armor to read each response, careful navigation of my desire for reconciliation versus my need for boundaries. The academic demands of Northwestern provided welcome distraction from family drama. The journalism program exceeded my expectations, challenging me intellectually while nurturing my passion for storytelling. My writing improved rapidly under the guidance of professors who treated student journalists with professional respect. For the first time in my life, I was in an environment where my academic dedication was the norm, rather than the exception, where my intelligence was assumed rather than questioned. Making friends came more easily than I had anticipated. Without the shadow of Amelia's social brilliance, without the weight of being the boring twin, I discovered my own capacity for connection. I joined the student newspaper, found my place in study groups, and gradually built a circle of friends who knew me only as Sibylla, not as one half of a mismatched pair. News from home came primarily through my grandmother and occasionally through Amelia, who had enrolled at Riverdale Community College as planned. Our conversations had a new candor to them, the physical distance allowing for emotional honesty that had been impossible when sharing a home. "Mom and Dad are still talking about you transferring back for spring semester," she reported during one phone call in October. "They don't understand that you're actually happy there." "Are they ever going to accept my decision?" I asked, already knowing the answer. "I don't think they know how," she admitted. Their whole picture of how our lives were supposed to go is shattered. In my weekly calls with grandmother Margaret, I received updates filtered through a more supportive lens. "They'll come around eventually," she assured me, "when they see how well you're doing, how right this path is for you." I wanted to believe her, but as Thanksgiving approached, the fragile nature of our family bonds became painfully evident. When I asked about coming home for the holiday, my father's response was coldly clear. "If you're choosing to live independently, you'll need to make your own holiday arrangements." The rejection stung, but it also clarified my position. I wasn't being punished for a specific action. I was being punished for existing beyond their control, for daring to chart my own course rather than accepting the supporting role they had assigned me in the family narrative. Thanksgiving that year was a makeshift affair in Jada's apartment off campus, where she hosted several holiday orphan students who couldn't or wouldn't go home for the break. We cooked a chaotic meal together, burning the rolls and overcooking the turkey, but laughing through every culinary disaster. Surrounded by new friends who accepted me without reservation, I found unexpected joy in this unconventional celebration. That evening, alone in my dorm room, I called my grandmother to wish her happy Thanksgiving. "I missed you today," I told her, fighting back tears. "I missed you too, sweetheart, but I'm so proud of you for making your own way." After our call, I opened my laptop and found an email from an address I didn't recognize. The subject line, "From your sister," made my heart skip a beat. Inside was a brief message from Amelia sent from a new email account. "They wouldn't let me use my phone to call you today, but I wanted to say happy Thanksgiving. It's strange not having you here. I'm proud of you, Sib. Really." Those simple words, sent despite our parents' disapproval, were a gift more precious than any holiday feast. My twin, who had benefited from our family's dysfunction her entire life, was finally seeing beyond her own experience to recognize mine. It wasn't a complete transformation, but it was a beginning. The fall semester flew by in a blur of classes, assignments, and new experiences. I earned strong grades in my journalism courses and had my first article published in the university newspaper, an analysis of campus accessibility issues that received positive feedback from both professors and peers. Each achievement reinforced my conviction that Northwestern was exactly where I needed to be, that standing my ground had been worth the painful consequences. As winter break approached, I faced another decision about going home. This time, I didn't ask permission. Instead, I booked a flight to Minneapolis and arranged to stay with my grandmother, letting my parents know my plans as a courtesy rather than a request. "I'll be in town from December 20th to January 4th. I wrote in a carefully worded email. "I'd like to see you if you're open to it." My father's reply came 3 days later, terse but not entirely hostile. "Your mother and I will be at your grandmother's for Christmas Eve dinner. We can talk then." The reunion was as awkward as I had expected, stilted conversation over turkey and stuffing, careful avoidance of any mention of Northwestern or my life there. My parents were polite but distant, treating me more like an acquaintance than a daughter. Only Amelia showed genuine interest in my college experience, asking questions about my classes and friends when our parents were out of earshot. After dinner, my father pulled me aside for a private conversation in my grandmother's small study. I braced myself for recriminations for renewed pressure to transfer to a local school. Instead, I found something unexpected: begrudging respect. "Your midterm grades were impressive," he said, examining a bookshelf rather than meeting my eyes. "Your grandmother showed us the dean's list notification." "Thank you," I replied, uncertain how to navigate this unfamiliar territory. "I still think you made the wrong choice," he continued, his voice stiff. "But I can acknowledge that you're doing well academically." It wasn't forgiveness or understanding. It wasn't an admission that they had been wrong to try to sabotage my future. But it was a crack in the wall, a small acknowledgement that my path might have validity even if it wasn't the one they had chosen for me. As the second semester began, I found a new equilibrium in my relationship with my family. We maintained limited contact, occasional phone calls and emails that carefully circumnavigated the deeper issues between us. It wasn't the warm, supportive family connection I had always craved, but it was a form of coexistence I could live with while building my independent life. More importantly, I discovered resources that helped me process the complex emotions surrounding my family situation. The university offered free counseling services, and in weekly sessions with Dr. Levine, I began untangling the knots of my childhood, examining the ways family favoritism had shaped my self-perception learning to validate my own experiences without requiring external confirmation. I also joined a campus support group for students navigating difficult family relationships, where I found community with others who understood the particular pain of being unseen or undervalued by those who should have cherished them most. In that safe space, I could voice the thoughts that had once seemed too disloyal to acknowledge that my parents' love had always been conditional, that their treatment of me had been fundamentally unfair, that their attempts to sabotage my education had been a profound betrayal. Spring brought unexpected growth in my relationship with Amelia. She had begun to thrive at community college, discovering an aptitude for business that had been overshadowed by our parents' Ivy League fixation. More significantly, she was developing an identity separate from the golden child persona that had defined her for so long. "I'm thinking of majoring in entrepreneurship when I transfer next year," she told me during one of our increasingly frequent phone calls. "I have all these ideas for sustainable business models that actually make a difference." "That sounds perfect for you," I encouraged, genuinely happy to hear excitement in her voice. "Where are you thinking of transferring? University of Minnesota, maybe. Their business school is really good." She paused before adding, "I'm applying on my own this time. No counselors, no parental connections. I want to get in because I earned it like you did." The acknowledgement brought tears to my eyes. All my life I had craved recognition from my family, validation that my path had worth, even if it differed from their expectations. Hearing it from Amelia, who had been the unwitting beneficiary of their favoritism, felt like a healing balm on an old wound. By the end of my freshman year, I had established myself as a promising journalism student with a growing portfolio of published work. My article on first-generation college students won a departmental award, and I secured a coveted summer internship with a Chicago magazine. Each achievement strengthened my confidence not just in my academic abilities, but in my right to pursue my own dreams, regardless of my parents' approval. When I returned to my grandmother's house for the summer, the dynamic with my parents had shifted subtly but significantly. There was still distance, still unresolved hurt on both sides, but there was also a new foundation of mutual respect. They had been forced to recognize that I could succeed without their guidance or support, that my independence was not a phase to be weathered, but a permanent recalibration of our relationship. One evening in late June, my mother stopped by my grandmother's house unexpectedly. She brought a small package wrapped in silver paper, offering it with uncharacteristic hesitation. "I saw this and thought of you," she said as I unwrapped a beautiful journal with my initials embossed on the leather cover. It wasn't an apology for trying to derail my education. It wasn't an acknowledgement of the years of favoritism that had preceded that final betrayal, but it was a peace offering, a tentative step toward seeing me as an individual worthy of thoughtful attention. "Thank you," I said, running my fingers over the embossed letters. "It's perfect for taking notes during my internship." We shared a cup of tea at my grandmother's kitchen table, our conversation careful but less strained than it had been in months. As she was leaving, my mother paused in the doorway. "You're doing well at Northwestern," she said, not quite a question. "I am," I confirmed. "It's exactly where I'm supposed to be." She nodded, a complicated expression crossing her face. "Maybe you knew better than we did after all." It wasn't everything I had wanted to hear, but in that moment it was enough. Not an eraser for the past, but a possible bridge to a different future, one where I could be both a daughter and my own person, where love didn't require the surrender of self. That night, I opened my new journal and wrote on the first page, "Family love should lift you up, not hold you back. Sometimes standing up for yourself is the kindest thing you can do for everyone involved." Looking at those words, I felt a sense of peace that had eluded me for much of my life. The path forward wouldn't be easy. There would still be difficult conversations, old patterns to dismantle, new boundaries to establish and defend. But I had proven to myself and to my family that I had the strength to claim my own space in the world, to build a future defined by my own dreams, rather than someone else's expectations. On my desk sat a framed copy of my first published article in the university paper, a tangible symbol of everything I had fought for and won. Next to it was a recent photo of Amelia and me, no longer identical in our aspirations, but perhaps more truly connected as sisters than we had ever been as twins. These two images side by side represented the delicate balance I was learning to maintain, honoring my connections to family while refusing to be limited by their vision of who I should be. Have you ever had to choose between family expectations and your own dreams? Drop a comment below sharing your experience or how you would have handled my situation. If this story resonated with you, please hit the like button and subscribe to hear more stories about finding your own path, even when others try to redirect you. Thank you for listening to my journey, and remember that standing up for yourself isn't selfish. It's often the first step toward becoming the person you're meant to be.